Good morning and welcome to our last Lockdown Learning Free Business Continuity webinar. It's a beautiful sunny day, so it's nice of you to, well, it's here in Lancashire. So I'm glad that so many of you have come along to listen in to the exciting topic we're covering today, which is emergency communications awareness campaigns. This is being brought to you by Neil Hedley-Smith, who's Director of Rawstorn Consulting. As usual, we'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar. If you'd like to ask Neil any questions, all you need to do is type in the question box on the control panel to the right of your screen, and we'll put these through to Neil at the end of the session. You'll receive a recording of the webinar a couple of hours after it is finished, in case you missed any of the session or would like to share the webinar with any of your friends or colleagues. So I think we're ready to begin, and I shall hand you over to Neil. So Neil, you are in charge now, just waiting for you to show your screen, which is currently showing, just make polite conversation while we get the
Just trying to make sure we've got the right screen showing. Lachlan,
right.
What can you see at the moment? Can you see the PowerPoint?
No, I'm seeing a pop-up from your reminder that it's time to do your webinar at 10 o'clock, and I've got your desktop.
Okay. What I want to do is show the other screen, and it doesn't seem to want to. Well, do you know what? In that case, I will switch this stuff onto the other one, and I will bring the PowerPoint onto this screen. There we go.
There we go. Okay, that's perfect. So we're going to do it in presentation mode.
And that's gone back to presenting on the other screen.
I think it was there for a second.
Yes, let's just.
So, okay, and if you make that, oh, it was there for a second, it's gone again. There we go. In presentation mode. I just wonder what.
Right, I'm going to cheat. Hang on a second. I'm going to remove. Which will therefore force everything onto this one.
Yep, we're good. We've got you. Although you sound a bit distant, that's all.
We'll sort all of that out in.
There we go. Perfect.
Seconds. Sorry about all of that. Now I want to minimize all of this. I'm just going to drop all that down there because we're not minimizing it. So, Lachlan, does that look all right?
It looks all right. I'll interrupt you if it doesn't, if it changes. Okay.
Excellent. Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much for that. Apologies about a couple of minutes of not perfect techno wizardry. So what we're going to talk about for the next maybe 45 minutes or so before questions is how to use your communications campaign, your awareness campaign around emergency communications to solve some particular problems. First of all, I want to make sure that you understand throughout this presentation, I might interchange the word critical with emergency. That's because I tend to think critical communications is more encompassing and doesn't quite have the panic association that emergency communications does. So what we're going to do is just work our way through this. Quick introduction. Yeah, that's me. At the moment, I have a bit more hair after 3 months in lockdown, but my job is to be a consultant program director, going into businesses and working on implementing their critical communication systems. Now, it's more than just the implementation, it is actually going through this entire process. So the last contract that I had was 18 months working for a global multinational where we deployed the platform across 30 different countries, 40-odd thousand people, and several hundred offices. I've worked for the last 10 years doing this sort of thing for various vendors, and have the dubious honor of having headed up a series of global implementation teams. So, quick agenda for us for the next few minutes. The first one: why should you worry about doing an awareness campaign for your critical communications system? I'll answer that one. The implementation goals, taking you all the way back to square one for why we should be doing this sort of stuff. We'll then talk about champions, how to build those within the organization, but also selecting the right people to actually bring into the project to make sure we get buy-in. Content, of course, we'll go through some. I'll give you some examples of what I've used in the past. We'll add all of that into effectively a toolkit, and I'll go through the things that you should have in your toolkit. And of course, we'll talk about success. Okay, so I think it is absolutely essential that you give as much credit to as many people as possible when you are running one of these campaigns, and that goes on and on and on, because this is, of course, about ongoing awareness in every organization. This is not a simple linear project. This is an ongoing cycle. And then we'll be open for questions. So I'll happily take any questions at the end of the session. Okay, so first thing I wanted to cover was why you should be concerned, why you should take the time to actually think about doing this properly. And the first thing that came to mind is the various statistics that have come out from the Business Continuity Institute over the last year or so about growth in emergency notification or crisis management tools and software. So more and more people are investing in these platforms, which is good, obviously. I am a great supporter of these things. I'm happy to discuss the relative scales, all that sort of stuff in future, but we'd certainly take up all this time doing so. I suspect that given the latest stats in the pandemic report from BCI, all that sort of stuff, there is going to be a jump in the number of people using these platforms over the next couple of years as we come out of the pandemic period, and we realize actually more and more time and effort needs to be devoted to business continuity and incident response. So that number's only going to go up. However, dig a little deeper and you realize that actually only or less than 75% of tests of critical communication platforms actually reach their expected response levels. And that means that 27% of the time we're having to go to top management and say, we know that you've spent all this money on our recommendation to get this, but we've not hit the threshold that we told you to expect. So we're failing to prove the return on investment, and that's a bad thing, because we need the top management buy-in on this sort of stuff, because it is in front of everyone. It's a really clear, easy indicator, your critical comm system, of how you can get business continuity as a whole in front of everyone, and how you can make it an approachable and understandable concept. It's a front man for the rest of the hard work you have to do in business continuity. So that's quite concerning. And I dug a little deeper into the communications report and realized that actually there are two outstanding reasons why people are not hitting those expected response levels. Clearly, lack of accurate staff contact information and lack of understanding from recipients are things we need to deal with. And let's be clear, I think both of those aren't hard to rectify. And if we rectify them, our pass rates go up, our response rates go up, we get to have a good news story to go to our top management. So I then thought, well, okay, what we need to do is understand why we're not getting to the point where the staff understand what we're trying to do and what we need them to do. And that needs us to go back to the why. So these are events that have happened and I've had to deal with in that last contract over the last, well, less than a year. So London Bridge, of course, or London Bridge 2. Australian wildfires, that's a great image. I love that one, just to show the extent of what's going on down there. The floods here in the UK, beginning of 2020, and of course we've had the pandemic, or we are in the midst of the pandemic. So using these examples gives you an opportunity to create an awareness campaign which can have a target of reducing those common issues. I'd also like to say one of the top 5 reasons why people aren't hitting those numbers, they say that they've had a poor implementation. Please always remember your implementation for these systems includes both administrators and recipients. And that brings us back to that communications campaign, right? We've got to embed it within the business, not just teach someone how to use it. Critical communications, frankly, we need to have a high value and authority for those communications within the organization so that when we have to send them, our staff recognize them. They don't think they're phishing, for example. They then confirm and action your commands. So thinking about command, control, and communication, without the comms, you're pretty much stuck for either command or control. So your awareness campaign is a chance to put business continuity onto every single desk, in front of every pair of eyes within your organization. And if you do it right, you can use it to create that value, distinguish it from other internal comms, and effectively use it as a front man for embedding business continuity into business as usual throughout the organization, not just within your incident response teams and exercising them, but exercising the whole business to actually understand what we're trying to do. So back to our implementation goals, nice and clear ones. Of course, we need top management buy-in. That is primary. We are, after all, asking for budget. We need to prove to these guys that we are supporting their strategic goals by delivering on our critical communication systems. The next one, we need to make sure that the tooling itself is effective and is appropriate. There are lots of vendors who are out there. Each one of those vendors is hiring salesmen. Salesmen will try and sell you the sparkle, sell you the sizzle. It is worth making sure that actually what you are investing in is appropriate for your level of maturity and your requirements. Many times I have actually been in a position where I'm trying to implement processes and platforms which are too advanced for the organization that we're trying to put them in. Please understand your own requirements before you go and invest in something or over-invest in a platform. Confident users and the administration group. There is an old adage which is very, very specific to this one. If you tell me about something, I'll forget it. If you show me, I'll remember. And if you let me do it, I will learn. We need your administrator group to be confident that they understand all of the processes that they need to go through and that they have done it themselves many times. We also need to make sure that we have confident colleagues. Okay, each one of those folk need to understand what to expect and what to do when they receive one of these communications. It was one of those top 2 points, and it's an easy win if you run an awareness campaign. The last one here, making sure that all of this comes together so that we embed our critical communication systems into business as usual. And in doing so, we actually get a bonus for business continuity and incident management as a whole. Okay, so when we're talking about our champions, well, incident response teams, if by now in 2020 you don't already have these in place, I'm very surprised. So these teams already exist. We already know who's in them. They've been up and running for quite some time. But when it comes to the communications, the emergency or critical communications within that, it's really important to identify at which level within your response structure communications are actively going to be sent. That might not be the same level at which they are written, but it's really important to understand the structure around the incident response and where we fit into that process. If we've got that, then we can identify the stakeholders for the communications activity. Okay, so this is going to be a subset, not just of the response teams, but actually there are some more people that we want to bring into this project because we want to embed it throughout the organization. We want buy-in from different groups, different people within the organization. We want them to own it. We want to empower them. So here's a list of potential champions for you. First up, of course, internal communications, corporate communications. These guys have a lot on their plate at the moment. They may have had originally a communications calendar, which may or may not still exist in various forms. What we would be asking them to do is deliver yet another campaign, fitting it into their schedule and asking them to be responsible. So it's really important that we go and we spend lots of time with your corporate communications team. These guys might actually end up being the people sending these notifications as well, depending on how many tiers you've got in your response structure, how decentralized you might be. So they are essential. We must get them on side. We must deliver a campaign to them in the format that they want. So they, realistically, these guys are our customer at this point. The HR team, the HR director, of course, you know, this is one of our primary stakeholders and champions within the organization. We're talking about duty of care, we're talking about accountability for safety, all those sort of things. But also the HR department own the data set that we need access to. So that became the biggest reason for top management buy-in at my last contract. The HR global exec had a committed strategic objective being to improve the quantity and quality of data within the HR information system. So we made that a priority within our own campaign. We used the alert system campaign to drive colleagues back to the HR information system in order to update their data which was a big win for the HR exec. And it also meant, of course, that we got better and better and better data for the platform itself. So go and find those wins. The business continuity team. All right, guys, we know this stuff. Okay, we know that part of our practices is embedding our processes into business as usual. Well, guess what? Here is an opportunity. And it's a great one because it means that it's in front of the entire organization every year. Awesome stuff. Marketing. Now, this might not be an obvious one, but what we're trying to do is create an advertising campaign, a marketing campaign, but we're trying to do it for an internal market, an internal segment. So we need to bring in specialists. We need to give them the opportunity to prove how good they are at their job in order to sell what we're trying to do to our staff. So there's a way there to empower them, to get them to buy into and own the campaign itself. And as you do that, you start to break down the barriers between various departments. And this ends up not being the business continuity team's campaign. This is actually our campaign. We're working with HR, we're working with corporate comms, we're working with marketing. We're bringing the whole thing together to deliver to everybody within the organization. It's all about bringing people together. And the marketeers or marketing team really need to be part of this from the off. And top management, of course. Okay, we need to work out the wins, the strategic wins for as many of the top management team as we can, so that we can align to those targets. We can work out how we can actively show that we are supporting those goals, so that when we go back after an exercise, we can clearly prove that what we've done has supported their goals. If that goal is accreditation to an ISO, if that goal is making sure that they can put into contracts or sign off on papers that say that they have these processes in place, find whatever that might be and make sure that we can prove to them that we've got it in place. So the content that we're talking about, there will be a number of existing communication tools within the organization. These will be the ones that the internal communications team already work with. So that'll be a newsletter, for example, or an intranet, or town halls that you go through. Whatever it might be, we want to get involved. Okay, so all of those standard corporate communication tools, make sure we've got content to put into them. Inductions, onboarding. From the moment someone joins the organization, they might have an HR induction. Great. So that's an opportunity to talk to them about the duty of care that the business has for them, about business continuity in general, and as part of that, we can introduce this critical communication system. And by the way, would you make sure that you have as many personal details within the HR system as you're comfortable for, but do understand if you don't put your personal phone number into the HR system, you may not receive the text message that tells you not to come into work tomorrow. I'm a big fan of images. You might be able to tell from this presentation. So I built a series of images that could be used as posters, e-postcards. They were put up on info screens at receptions and in open plan offices. We really pushed on making sure that there was a solid theme throughout the campaign. So those themes, or the ones that we used at least, were these four. So severe weather, pandemic, security, and we use cyber alerts as well, or cyber attacks. So what you can see, or you will see in a second, is the series of images that we used. But there's so much out there. We're just looking at the last few months, and these are images of the Taal volcano, which erupted in the Philippines just beside Manila at the beginning of this year. Conveniently enough, it was just as I was trying to implement the critical comms platform in the Philippines, so it gave us a really useful way of pressing the immediate requirement for it. But there's so much that's been going on over the last year that this is an amazing opportunity to get in front of people. Next point is absolutely essential. Create an internal brand for your company. This is your alert system. It's not the name of the vendor alerts. Okay? Don't use the vendor name. Make it agnostic of vendor, because let's be honest, you may not spend the next 30 years with the same vendor. So do think about this. Do make sure that you create an internal name for your system. Okay, engagement. Well, there are a couple of options there. Relevance or entertainment. The business that I was working with, it was a media business, so lots of millennials. Entertainment was the way forward. So we had summer parties last year, for example, where we launched various pieces of the alert system, and we had a stand there, we had games there, we had giveaways there, we had a lot of budget, I do admit, so we were very lucky with all of that. But what I want you to do is think about your demographics within your organization, and I want you to build the reasons why those different segments may find engagement with the communications platform directly and with business continuity as a whole as a secondary point there. Okay, so once we've got that, we can design communication assets, articles, which work to each one of those engagement points, and we can send them to different people at different moments. All of those assets go into your awareness toolkit. If you recall, I was talking to you about how the corporate communications team, we need to be as effective when we come to them again and say, can you do this, as possible. So having a campaign timeline, working backwards from the exercise date, saying on this day, send these things, on that day, send these things, just makes it so easy for them to say, yeah, okay, everything's ready, we're on board, let's go and do this. Email templates. Part of that is making sure that you've got the right levels of information and the right messages pre-written so that you can hand over to the comms team and say, here you go, and there are templated messages in there from the CEO down to the heads of function, from the heads of function to the team leaders, from the team leaders to all of their staff. All of that content already exists, and you have controlled the message, and you're in a position therefore to make sure that everyone, when they receive this, knows what their boss and their boss's boss actually wants them to do and why it's important that they do it. All of the images I've been talking about, go out there, find powerful images that fit your themes, which you can use to really grab people's attention. Next one, those standard channels. Of course, we need to make sure that we've got newsletter articles, we've got content for the intranet, whatever we can build to get ourselves into those channels, build it, put it in the toolkit. I was lucky enough to have some budget to put towards some giveaways, some branded giveaways. So I ended up with hand sanitizers, emergency ponchos, which were in those little orange baubles, and webcam covers as my 3 giveaways. Now, as it turns out, they were quite accurate. There have been cyber attacks. It's Britain, so throughout last summer, those ponchos were quite useful. And the hand sanitizer blew off the shelves. We put boxes of this on the reception desk, so that each one of them was branded with our internal brand. It was a nice, easy way of getting that brand, that internal brand, into people's faces, into their heads, so that it wasn't going to go anywhere. A climactic finale. Okay, now exercising your platform is essential. Okay, and I'm saying exercising rather than testing, because this is an exercise for the whole business. Remember, I was talking to you about the corporate comms team and your administrators and learning by doing. So we want them to do, and we want our staff to do. We're not just testing our response rates here. We are exercising the entire organization. Personally, I think that if you look at it as an exercise program over the course of a series of years, that's going to be even better for visualizing your progress through embedding business continuity and critical awareness into the organization. Essential. Post-exercise communications. Just getting to the test and then not releasing feedback and not saying, thank you guys, we really appreciate the fact that you did this, isn't good enough. Folks, we need to say well done to people. We need to say, this is what you did, this is the benefit that's come from it. We need to share that success. And that's all about that post-exercise communications. You can put all of the results, relevant results, into another news article and send it back and get it out through the corporate communications channels again. So once you've built the toolkit, this is the hard bit. You've got to give it away. Okay. For me, it was about releasing it down to local ownership within the countries that we were working in. For you, it might be actually giving it to the corporate communications team or to the incident response team and saying, we understand the process. Now, we will be there to support you. Of course we will, but we need you to own this process. We need you to own this campaign, including the exercise. Okay. So that localization that I had to go through, translation into the appropriate languages. So all of the content had to be editable. Every image had to be editable. I couldn't do anything that couldn't be translated into 10 different languages. Part of that then meant that there would be alternative channels and content for each theme, which would be relevant to the country and the environment that we were deploying into. There's no point in putting, this fella in a snow day into a Brazilian environment. It doesn't fit. So we needed to have different images, different supporting images to fit our themes for the various different environments we were putting this into. As they built up, we then pulled all of that content back into the toolbox so that it could be used in the next country that we went to. For example, the Australians wrote something that was really good. That was used by the South Africans. Keep that content available to everybody, and keep maintaining this throughout the program for your exercises. this also gives you an opportunity to get people working together who wouldn't normally. You know, do you know that the guys in the incident response team in France, do they know the guys who are in the same positions in Italy? Because really, we should be building mutual support within the organization there as well. Finding ways to break down all these silos is really useful when it comes to embedding within the organization. So, success, post-exercise reporting. What we tend to do with these things is find a load of statistics that our vendors hand us, which is all very nice, and we can say, yay, we passed, and we can put this stuff together in a little post-exercise report, which we, as business continuity or incident management professionals, understand. But what I'd like to do is really bring all of you back and say, hold on a minute, our stakeholders are the ones that we need to confirm that what we've done has helped them. So the success of our exercise isn't really about the responses over time or the number of people who pressed the right button. What we need to do is go back and prove to each one of our stakeholders that this campaign really helped them achieve their goals. So we've got to celebrate success. We've got to do it at each level for each point within our process. And that includes the staff themselves, our colleagues. They need to be told, well done. Here's an example of some better stats. Okay, what we're looking at here are the number of channels available per person within the HR information system. So I could specifically go to the HR exec and say, at the point when we started our campaign, the majority of your staff actually at this point had one delivery method within the HR system, which was work email. So if they didn't have a device which got their work email, you couldn't contact them. After we ran our campaign, you'll see this green line clearly going up and up and up. Well, that's 3 channels. So that means that they've added their personal email and their personal phone number. Now that's about as obvious a clear benefit to the HR exec, whose goal was to improve the quality and quantity, and it's also improving my chances of getting a direct response back from my my contact. Create those win-win scenarios. So what we need to do is understand the statistics that will help prove that what we are delivering is a success. And we need to be measuring them from the time that we start the program so that we can show this kind of benefit to those execs. It's about, therefore, much more than just saying, yay, we passed. All right. We need to make sure we understand those at the beginning of the process so that we can measure them throughout the implementation phase. So when we come through to validation, actually we can say, yes, here is our proof. And that proof, that's how we get to say the return on investment has been clear. Okay, we have improved all of these things, which are not even our primary goal, but we've improved the business as a whole. Okay, so of course, from my perspective, I could say the more channels within the platform, the more chance of getting a confirmed response. For me, especially when dealing with international delivery. Ongoing awareness. Let's be clear about this one. I know Charlie has said this during lockdown learning as well. Exercise campaigns run over multiple years. Okay, please think of an awareness program as a multi-year campaign. Okay, so what we built was a 4-week awareness campaign, which led up to this finale, the exercise, a whole country exercise. And that's great and good, but we then need to build in our after action reviews. So we need to look at our metrics from the platform itself and from the HR information system. We then needed to go back and make sure that corporate comms were happy, that they were scheduling these awareness campaigns and exercises into their comms calendar for the next year at appropriate points so that it could coincide with other things, making sure that they were invested in doing it again and again and again. Strike while the iron's hot in that one. And I wanted to make sure that we also adapted the exercise itself. Learn more. Don't do the same thing over and over again. When you've got an exercise program, you don't do the same thing. You change things, you tweak them so that you can learn more about the business, learn how to make it stronger. So in terms of critical communications exercises, consider running them out of hours. Consider not using work email. Okay, so that review stage after our exercise is really important. And then we've got an ongoing awareness period, frankly, throughout the year. Okay, so active use of the system, that's part of your awareness. Inductions and onboarding, that's part of your awareness. Continued annual awareness campaigns leading up to your annual exercises, that's part of your awareness campaign. And just please do make it a cycle. Okay, adapt, tweak, exercise again, review, continue your communications campaigns, adapt, exercise again. We are trying to get to the point where when you receive an emergency or a critical communications alert from your business, you recognize it, you respond to it, and you act on it, because that's what you do in your business. You recognize them, you respond, and you action. Okay, and there's no question, because this is normal, this is business as usual. That's our goal. The awareness campaign itself, I'm sure everyone's aware of the the 6 parts of this cog. Really, please do think of these as programs. Okay, an initial implementation of a communication software tool, great. You're not finished yet. Okay, that's a little project. The program is ongoing. The program requires you to maintain skill sets, awareness throughout the organization, throughout the lifetime of that product, at the very least. So it's all got to be run as a program, as a project, subject to the BC policy. The analysis stage, of course, we've got to understand the specific structure of this organization and the requirements to prove the return on investment. Design phase, this is the moment where we can design something which will help those strategic goals and give us an opportunity to design an implementation and validation which will prove that we are supporting those goals. The implementation is all about getting the entire organization invested in these systems, these platforms. Validation, this is the exercise, of course, and we need to make sure that we're measuring enough to prove the return on investment. Of course, the whole thing, when it's done as effectively as possible, should lead to that embedding of all of this into business as usual, and that of course is our ultimate goal. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That's 45 minutes. That's my presentation on why I think it's going to be essential over the next couple of years for you to really run more than just initial implementations of these platforms, really get involved and build communications awareness campaigns. It's a win-win for you. It does mean you're going to have to spend some time going out and meeting some different stakeholders, but it is worth it. I really do believe that. All right, so let's move on. Let's see what we can do about some questions.
I think unless we're going to have some questions come through straight away, what we might do is we might wrap up. So let me just ask. All right, there is a question just coming through now. So I'll just.
Yeah, okay. I've got 2 questions so far. So the first one is, can you define a lack of accurate staff contact info, please? Do you mean contact details, identifying next of kin, etc.? Hi, Neil. So first up, that's a really good question. I suspect that the BCI point there is talking about specific contact details in terms of personal communications channels. So phone numbers, email addresses, that sort of thing for your contacts, for your employees. What I'm used to is looking for a work phone number, especially if you're issuing mobile phones to people. That should be part of the platform. A work email address, yeah, you really should have that one. And then asking the contact to give you a personal email address and a personal phone number. I'm a little more dubious about next of kin details being put into these platforms. I have put them into systems, but I've put them in as additional information fields, so they're available for HR to pull in a report phase. But I would not ever use an emergency communication system to try and contact next of kin. I'm happy to have a conversation with you about that one, the whys and wherefores, of course. Just pop me an email or give me a call, and I'll talk you through the experience that I actually have of one of my clients once doing that. It was less than impressive, and I was quite annoyed by it. So no problem, Neil, no problem at all. Next question is from Kat. Today, still in pandemic, but already today, company CEO say we have other priorities to catch up within the business. We spend already a lot of time and effort on this pandemic. Today, we have to earn more money. Yes, of course. Right, the primary goal of the business is to serve that core requirement, and part of that is making money. Of course it is. That's the same question that has come up every time anyone within business continuity is asked your executives to spend money on things which may appear at first not to create money. Right now, lots of businesses are going to be very cash poor. Fair enough. What I would say is the effort involved in business continuity will only prove its worth if you look again at the number and severity of incidents which have occurred over the last few years. This stuff is happening more and more. We have longer and longer supply chains. We have more risks globally. As such, investing in business continuity, incident management, and critical communications will save you more money in the long term. Now, I'm not saying go out and buy the biggest sparkliest comms platform that you can find, I did say make sure that you get what is appropriate for your business and for your maturity level. Okay. All right then. I hope that that answers the question for you there, Kat. Well, Lachlan, I'm not seeing any more questions come up, so that's our series.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed that, listening to that a lot. It's nice to hear a different voice as well from the usual, so it's good. So thank you very much. Thank you also to everyone who attended and asked those questions. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be emailing a recording of the webinar in a couple of hours' time, and this will go sent directly to you from GoToWebinar. All the recordings of our previous webinars are available to view on our website as well. We hope you've enjoyed listening to these webinars over the last few weeks, and they have provided some light relief from everything that's going on at the minute. If circumstances change, we may introduce them again. In the meantime, that's the last free business continuity webinar. We'll be running live on online courses until at least the end of September, and we've just scheduled some new dates with some new courses soon to be released as well. So keep an eye out for those if you want to keep up your training and CPD levels. Thank you again for joining us. Enjoy the sunshine if it's sunny in your part of the world, and I know it's one day early, but have a nice weekend if you can. Thank you.